Today I will tell you how a single whisper, just 5 words from my granddaughter, saved my entire life. We were at the lawyer's office that morning. The room smelled faintly of polished wood and stale coffee. Jason was already seated, flipping through a thick folder, his gold cufflinks flashing each time he turned a page. Claire sat beside him, arms folded, her eyes darting between me and the door, as if she were expecting someone to stop us. But we weren't doing anything unusual, or so I thought. Greaves, the estate attorney, smiled that plastic smile I've never trusted on any man. He tapped his pen on the signature line. "This," he said smoothly, "is just a final update to your estate plan, Mrs. Langley. Nothing complicated. A formality." I adjusted my glasses. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for the pen. I wasn't nervous, just tired. 78 years old, and this was what it had come to. Meetings, paperwork, discussions about where I'd live and what would happen to the house once I was gone. That's when it happened. Emily, my granddaughter, sitting quietly in the corner, leaned toward me. Her voice barely reached above a whisper. "Grandma, don't sign anything, please." I froze. I turned to her slowly. Her eyes were wide, not scared, but alert, controlled. "What happened?" I asked. "Trust me," she said. "Just that. No explanation, no panic, just certainty." I trusted her, and everything I believed about my family, my safety, my own decisions started to unravel. Jason's chair scraped the floor. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his tone light, but with an edge sharp enough to cut steel. I stared at the paper again. Something didn't feel right. Not just about the document, about the whole room. Why was Greaves sweating when the air conditioning was running? Why did Claire avoid eye contact as if her neck were stuck in place? I stood up, slowly, with both hands on the table. "We're done here," I said. Jason laughed nervously. "Come on, Patricia, it's just," I said, "we're done," I repeated. My voice was soft, but it had weight. Decades of motherhood, of loss, of surviving widowhood and raising a family through 2 recessions. It taught me how to say no, like a storm says rain. Emily stood with me. She put her hand on my elbow gently as if to steady me, but I knew it was a quiet signal. We were a team now. Claire finally looked up. I saw guilt. I saw history, but I didn't see regret. Jason muttered something under his breath as I walked out, but I didn't catch it. And I didn't need to, because right there in that quiet moment when I walked away from a signature, I walked into the most dangerous truth I had ever uncovered. So stay with me, because this story isn't just about betrayal. It's about what happens when the people you love most believe they can outsmart you, and what happens when they're wrong. If you feel a chill in your chest, already hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment below. This is just the beginning of Grandma Life Stories, where the truth always finds its way home. Emily didn't speak until we were half a block away from Greaves' office. Her hand stayed on my elbow, steady, guiding me down the quiet sidewalk like we were walking through a minefield. The street outside smelled faintly of rain on concrete, even though the sky was a pale, cold blue. We turned into a small coffee shop tucked between a dry cleaner and a bookstore. The bell above the door chimed, and the warm scent of espresso wrapped around us. Emily chose a table in the far corner, away from the window, and set her bag down with a kind of urgency that didn't match her usual calm. "Sit here," she said. I lowered myself into the chair, still gripping my purse. My heart was steady, but my mind felt crowded. She ordered nothing. No coffee, no tea, just pulled her laptop out and flipped it open. Her fingers moved fast, like she had rehearsed this. "I wasn't sure when I'd get a chance to show you this," she said, her voice low, "but you need to see it now." The screen lit up with 2 PDF files side by side. She tapped the trackpad, enlarging the first document. "This," she said, "is the estate agreement you and Mom reviewed last year, the one you actually approved." I recognized the pages, instantly clean, straightforward, nothing that made me uneasy. Then she clicked over to the second file. "And this," she continued, "is the one Greaves had ready for you to sign today." I leaned forward, my glasses catching the reflection of the screen. At first, the pages looked similar. The same letterhead, the same first paragraph. but halfway through my eyes caught on a section highlighted in pale yellow. Full power of attorney Emily read aloud, including the right to transfer, sell, or otherwise dispose of all real and personal property without further notice or consent. The words landed heavy in my chest. She scrolled further, and here, authorization to designate or change beneficiaries on any accounts or assets at sole discretion of the attorney in fact. My mouth felt dry. That's everything I said? Emily nodded once. Everything you own, every account, every piece of property, gone with one signature. I tried to steady my breathing, but my eyes kept moving down the page. Then I saw it. Page 12. The final page. A signature. My name. My handwriting. Or rather, my handwriting from another time. But I had never touched this document before today. It was my name, but it was flat. Too perfect. A scan. I gripped the edge of the table. The coffee shop felt suddenly too bright, every sound spoon against ceramic, the hiss of the milk steamer too sharp. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a scene. But inside, a current of heat was rising slow and relentless. "How long have you had this?" I asked. "A week," Emily said. She didn't blink. "I've been tracking changes in their files since I saw Greaves emailing Jason late at night. I recognized the file name. I made copies before they could delete the originals." Her voice was steady, but I could see the pulse in her neck quicken. She had been carrying this alone. I sat back, folding my hands in my lap. "So this wasn't a mistake," I said. "It wasn't an accident." "No," she replied. "This was a plan, and it's not just Greaves. Jason's in on it. Mom, too." The words landed like stones. I thought of Claire, her eyes locked on the table during the meeting, avoiding me like a stranger. I thought of Jason's half-smile when I hesitated to sign. And I thought of the years, decades of trust I had handed to them without a second thought. The documents glared back at me from the screen. The true agreement on the left, untouched, honest. And on the right, the trap. The theft. Emily closed the laptop and leaned in. "You didn't sign. That's the only reason we still have a chance." I nodded slowly. My throat felt tight, but my mind was clear in a way it hadn't been all morning. The coffee shop chatter swelled and receded around us, but it was like we were sitting inside a glass dome. No one else mattered. For the first time, I wasn't wondering if something was wrong. I knew it was. And I knew we weren't dealing with an impulsive betrayal. This had been built piece by piece behind my back. The only question now was how far they were willing to go, and how far I was willing to go to stop them. Trust is not something you can measure in dollars, but it can vanish faster than a check clears. Claire is my only daughter, my firstborn, the child I carried through 2 hospital scares, the one who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. And yet, somewhere along the way, the space between us turned into something I could not name. I remember the day she called me, her voice shaking, but coated in a brittle cheerfulness. She had gone under. The boutique business she'd poured her savings into her pride, her dream had collapsed after a year of bad sales and worse decisions. She owed more than she could ever repay on her own. I didn't ask for every detail. I didn't want to. When your child is drowning, you don't stop to ask how they fell in, you just reach in and pull. So I cashed in a part of my retirement account, not all of it, but enough to take the sharpest edge off her debt, enough to let her breathe again. I told myself it was a loan. We both knew I'd never ask for it back. A month later, she stopped calling. At first, I thought she was busy rebuilding her life. Then my letters went unanswered. My voicemails, too. 2 years of silence. I didn't know if she was angry at me, embarrassed, or simply gone. Every holiday that passed without her felt like pressing on a bruise just to see if it still hurt. Then one Sunday afternoon, she appeared on my porch. Not a call beforehand, not even a knock. Just the shadow through the glass and her voice lighter than air saying, "Hi, Mom." She hugged me like nothing had happened. She looked older, not just in the lines around her mouth, but in her eyes. They were sharper, like someone who had learned to read a room before speaking. She said she'd been thinking about me, that she was worried about my future security, that we should talk finances so she could help me make smart choices. I wanted to believe her. I told myself this was a bridge being rebuilt plank by plank. Maybe she was finally ready to be the daughter I remembered. So I let her in, not just into my house, but into my routines. The tea in the mornings, the walks in the park, the quiet evenings where she would sit at my kitchen table with her laptop open, researching investment strategies. The calls started a month later, short, precise, and always with a hint of urgency. Mom, I spoke to a friend who's a financial advisor. You should really consider simplifying your accounts. Mom, you have to protect your assets. Probate is a nightmare. Mom, we should get all this in writing so no one can take advantage of you later. It sounded like concern. It felt like love. But love doesn't usually come with scripts. Somewhere in the rhythm of those calls, I started to notice the pattern. She never outright lied. She didn't need to. She would paint the edges of a picture, then let my own imagination fill in the rest. If there was a risk, she'd magnify it just enough for me to lean toward her solution. She had a gift for leaving out the center of the canvas, and I, grateful for her presence after 2 years of absence, let myself believe the picture was whole. That's why, when we walked into Greaves' office this morning, I didn't hesitate to sit down. I didn't think about the folder on the table or why she had been so insistent that today was the right time to finalize my estate plans. It wasn't until Emily pulled me out of that chair that I realized how much of my trust in Claire was built on pieces that were never there. She hadn't lied to me. She had simply never told me enough. Now, sitting in that cafe with Emily's laptop still warm from her hands, I could see the outline of the truth. Not the full picture yet, just the edges again. And in the center, a shadow taking shape. I thought about the little girl afraid of thunderstorms, the young woman with the collapsing boutique, the daughter who had vanished and then reappeared. Which version of her was real, or were they all true, just incomplete? And what did it mean that I still wanted to protect her even now? Those were questions I wasn't ready to answer. Not yet. But I knew one thing from this moment on: every word, every gesture, every helpful suggestion from Claire would be weighed not against the past I remembered, but against the truth I was starting to uncover. The truth that might save me or shatter everything left between us. I went home with Emily's laptop still echoing behind my eyes. The screen had closed, but the questions stayed open. I set my keys in the blue dish by the sink, filled the kettle, and opened the hall closet where the fireproof cabinet lives. The tumblers clicked beneath my fingers. Inside were the binders I have built across decades, tabbed, labeled, dated, my life translated into paper. I carried the binders to the dining table and pushed aside oranges and mail. The house was quiet, not peace, only pause. I opened the binder labeled Properties, 2010 to 2022. Each tab held a small history: offers, inspections, rent rolls, tax receipts. I flipped to 2015. There it was, the Maple Street duplex in Ashland, the Riverside fourplex over the county line, the Ash Grove townhome. We said would be Claire's stepping stone into responsible ownership. I remembered the smell of wet lumber the day we walked Maple Street. Claire in boots too new for mud, her laugh rising when I negotiated the price down. I pulled the recorded deeds from their sleeves. The original purchase documents were as I remembered. Grantees listed as Patricia Langley and Claire Thompson joint tenants with rights of survivorship. I let out a slow breath. Proof of what was true. Then I opened my laptop and went to the Jackson County Recorder's site, then Multnoma's portal for the Portland properties. I typed parcel numbers. I waited. The results arrived like cold water. For Maple Street, the current vesting showed one owner, Claire Thompson. Instrument number 3 years after closing. For Riverside fourplex, the same. Title held solely by Claire. Change recorded the summer I was recovering from a fall. For Ash Grove again, Claire alone. I searched for any quitclaim or warranty deed from me to her. Nothing. No supporting instrument linking my interest to that transfer. Just silence in the chain of title. where my name should live. I rescued the kettle before it screamed and set it aside. My hands were steady. My throat was not. I poured, watched the ribbon of water curl into the cup, and returned to the table. In the sleeve behind the Ashgrove folder was a folded sheet of lined paper, Claire's handwriting from 8 years ago. Titling in my name temporarily for the rate it read, "We will add you next month. Promise." At the bottom, a heart. At the top, my initials where I had acknowledged. Not a signature, only trust. There were other scraps that felt innocent when they were written. A text I had printed and saved. "Mom lender needs one signer today. I am here already. You are teaching. I will fix title after." A note on a sticky flag. "Refi, quick. Ask Greaves." Paper that looked like love because it leaned on urgency. Love that now looked like leverage. I pushed the chair back and stood at the window. The maple in the yard held its leaves like coins. The light through them was copper. On winter nights in the same room, my husband would listen to me explain amortization schedules. He would grin and raise his mug. "Trust is love without paperwork," Frank would say, a joke he told to make me stop working after dinner. I whispered his line now and felt how wrong it sounded. Trust had been the reason I did not insist on notarized consents for the refinance. Trust had been the reason a sticky note became a bridge between intention and record. Trust had been the ribbon that tied a promise to a file, a ribbon anyone could pull. I sat again and listed dates: purchase, refinance, change of vesting. I highlighted gaps. I circled the summer of my fall, the autumn when Claire stopped answering my texts for a week and then returned with flowers. I wrote questions in the margins: who requested the title changes? Which notary stamped the acknowledgments? Where was I when my name went quiet? The shock did not arrive like thunder. It arrived like tide, quiet then relentless. I was not grieving property. I was grieving the version of me who believed that mothering could substitute for witnessing, that history could substitute for a signature, that love could substitute for law. I closed the binder and pressed my palms to the cover. The plastic was warm from the lamp. The oranges on the table glowed like small suns. The house smelled faintly of Earl Grey and dust. I looked at the neat labels I had made and saw how order can hide a fracture. Somewhere between 2015 and now, my name slipped off my own life like a tag torn from a sleeve. I breathed once. I spoke to the empty room. This is not love anymore. This is ownership. Emily returned the next afternoon with a backpack and a steadiness that quieted the house. We sat at my kitchen table. Kettle hummed. She set her phone face down, slid a flash drive toward me. "I did not guess," she said. I watched. I nodded. "Tell me when it started." A few weeks ago, she answered, I came home early from class. Jason had the office door half open. The printer worked like a storm. Stacks of paper on the credenza. The top page read, "Proposed Will." He fed the scanner like a dealer. He did not hear me until machine jammed. I pictured his jaw tighten. Did he say why he said he was helping Mom streamline family planning? That it was routine? That I should focus on school? Emily lifted her cup. He asked why I was home. I said my internship at the legal clinic needed me the next morning. He went still. Then he told me to quit. To quit. His exact words were, "You defend strangers against families. You are learning to take outsiders' side." He called the clinic a distraction. He said real loyalty starts at home. I folded my hands. "And you did not quit." "No," she said, but I changed my route. If he was scanning wills and printing drafts, there would be a draft that mattered. I started watching metadata. Metadata, I repeated. Emily plugged the flash drive into my laptop and opened a folder named Household. She clicked a file titled Estate Update Final. The document filled the screen. The text looked ordinary until she zoomed in on the signature page. "Look at the date," she said. "Month, day, year. Now look closely." The numerals were crisp, uniform until they were not. The last two sat higher than the rest. Their weight was wrong. The curve on the two belonged to a different family of letters. A different font, I said. A different font, she echoed. Someone replaced the date after the page was prepared. The baseline shifts. The kerning is off. It is a small crime that assumes an older eye will not notice. She moved to page 5. Here is where they folded in full power of attorney and hid it behind cross-references. Elegant if you do not know the trick. Clumsy once you do. The old teacher in me woke. "How did you copy this?" I mirrored the office desktop to my tablet while Jason was on a call, she said. Then I imaged the working directory. He saved everything in one place because he wants control. Control makes people lazy. She tapped another file. "Listen." Jason's voice came first, smooth, friendly. "She is coming in on Tuesday," he said. "Claire will keep the pace moving. We need the attorney in fact clause front and center but dressed like a consolidation." Greaves answered. Older, drier, certain. "Once she signs, the rest is cleanup. Cleanup." The word tasted like bleach. Emily paused the audio. "He used that line twice," she said. Later, he talked about moving you to assisted care if there was pushback. Greaves suggested a friendly evaluator who could question capacity. They were preparing narratives, investment, safety, simplification. A cold clarity rose. I pictured folders in my cabinet, careful tabs, a life's work trimmed into categories other people could harvest. "How long have you been watching?" "Since the printer jam," she answered. First, I backed up the files to the cloud, then I made an offline copy in case Jason wipes the server. I also printed the version history, edits, timestamps, usernames. "Does your mother know I asked?" "She knows he is persuasive," Emily said. "She knows she is tired of failing. She does not know how far he planned to go. She does not want to know. She wants the promise without the evidence." Emily turned the screen toward me. "If you want to fight, we can fight," she said. "But you should know what fighting looks like. It looks like logs and affidavits. It looks like calling people who will lie and making them tell the truth. It looks like keeping your voice steady when they try to make you sound confused." I smiled without joy. I taught 8th graders for 30 years. I know how to keep my voice steady. She exhaled. "Then we start by preserving everything. Your binders, your emails, your texts with Claire. We do not chase them. We let them move first. People who believe they are clever tell on themselves." I covered her hand. "You watched," I said. "You learned." She shook her head. "You were not blind," she said. "You were a mother." I closed the laptop. "All right," I said. "They wanted quiet. They will have witnesses instead." Emily nodded. I already made a list. I called Karen the morning after Emily played me the recording. We taught Sunday school together before she joined the county notary office. If anyone could tell me whether I was mad or merely early, it was Karen. She answered on the second ring. I told her I needed seasoned eyes on an estate document. She told me to meet her at the public library back table. I carried only copies. Karen arrived with a canvas tote. We sat. I laid out 2 versions of the estate plan, the clean one from last year and the one with the buried power of attorney. She adjusted her readers, slid a ruler under the lines, paused when she reached the date. "This is not clean," she said. "The font swap jumps. The clause references are misnumbered. Someone got clever and then got tired. Is it illegal?" I asked, "or only ugly?" "Ugly does not move a judge," she said. "Illegality needs proof of intent. A bad edit is not fraud, but a bad edit used with a plan can be." "Tell me the plan." I told her about Jason the scanner, the phone call with Greaves, names, times, locations. She listened without blinking. She tapped the stack. "If you take this to anyone today, they will call it a family dispute. They will say you are confused. They will say your daughter meant well and your son-in-law is clumsy with forms. And because you are 78, they will offer to call a mediator. You will leave angrier than you arrived." "So I wait," I said. "You prepare," she corrected. "Waiting without a plan is surrender. You need admissible pieces, not just hunches." She made a list in tidy block letters. First, preserve the files with metadata. Print and keep originals in a sealed envelope. Photograph the envelope. Sign across the seal. Date it. Keep a log. Second, make a transcript of the recording. Have a neutral listener compare the audio and sign an affidavit. Third, gather samples of your signature from different years. Attach a notarized declaration identifying them. Store duplicates securely. I nodded. Chain of custody. She smiled. You remember the language. I remember the feeling, I said. Being told my word was not enough. Also call the bank, she said, and request written confirmation of every power of attorney on file. You want letters with dates and signatures. Ask your doctor for a letter stating your cognitive status. It is an indignity. Do it anyway. I looked down at my hands. The ring Frank gave me sat steady on my finger. There is one more thing, Karen said. You will want to march into Greaves' office and dare him to try this again. If you fight them now, you lose. But if you wait, they'll dig their own grave. The sentence landed like a compass. How do I make them keep digging? You give them just enough rope, she said. Schedule a second signing. Act tired but willing. Ask simple questions that make them explain their strategy aloud. Keep your answers brief. Never accuse. Predators reveal themselves when the water seems still. I exhaled slowly. I can do very still, Karen. She squeezed my forearm. You have done harder things. We would do this carefully together. On my way home, I tried a rehearsal. I called the bank manager who has known me for 20 years. I asked about a recent power of attorney file request. He thanked me for calling, then explained that privacy rules limited his answer. His tone softened when he used my first name, hardened when I asked for his email. Institutional sympathy sounds a lot like a locked door. I called a property manager I trained years ago. He wished me well, said family misunderstandings are common, told me to rest. I thanked him and ended the call before my voice broke. No one would believe me without paper. Back at the house, I followed Karen's list. I labeled a legal pad evidence log, wrote the date and time, described each file we copied, noted Emily as witness. We sealed the flash drive in a manila envelope, signed across the flap, photographed the seal. We started an index of my signatures, tax returns, old leases, a letter Frank wrote that included both our names. The ink on his side had bloomed, mine held its line. When Emily left for class, the rooms widened. Evening light found the china cabinet. Each glass pane returned a small square of sun. I set the envelope beside the wedding dishes, evidence next to the plates we saved for Sundays. I am not alone, I told the quiet. I am simply early. This time I would not confuse patience with surrender, stillness with silence, love with paperwork. That night I set the kettle to boil and stared at the phone. The house felt like a stage waiting on cues. Karen's list sat beside my binder's edges, neat as guardrails. It was time to move. I scrolled to Claire's name. My thumb hovered. Then I pressed call. When she answered, her voice was bright sugar over stone. I softened mine. I told her I was ready to finish everything next week if she and Jason arranged the papers. She did not hesitate. Relief flooded through the line like warm air from a vent. She said she would tidy the language loop in Greaves and make the process painless. She apologized for the confusion at the first meeting. She blamed nerves. She thanked me for trusting her again. I replied like a woman grateful for guidance. I asked if we could meet Tuesday afternoon. She agreed quickly. Her boots clicked on tile somewhere. She promised directions by text soon. When we hung up, I set the phone beside the teapot and let the silence weigh itself. The plan felt like stepping onto black ice. Necessary, dangerous, survivable, with careful feet. Emily arrived before dusk with a pouch and a calm I knew she had practiced. She placed a button-sized recorder on the table, a single switch, a lapel magnet. She explained battery life and how the microphone favored low voices. She clipped it inside my cardigan to test placement. We will keep everything ordinary, Emily said. Speak softly. Let them fill the silence. Ask them to repeat definitions. Ask who benefits if you cannot manage your accounts. Nod, take your time. Never accuse. She set her phone beside mine and paired an earpiece so she could listen nearby if needed. We practiced phrases while the kettle hissed, my voice measured, my hands still. We agreed on a hand signal if I needed to leave, 2 taps against my cup. Sleep did not arrive easily. It perched at the edge of the room like a crow. I lay awake measuring the distance between caution and fear, between dignity and strategy. In the morning, I chose a cardigan with a placket so the recorder would not print. I pinned a brooch to distract eyes. Emily braided my hair and tucked the earpiece into a glasses case. Before she left, she squeezed my shoulder. No speeches, only the weight of her hand. At noon, I called Claire to confirm Tuesday. I let fatigue color my words. I asked if she and Jason could keep things simple. I said paperwork makes me nervous. She softened like butter under heat. She promised refreshments and a room. She promised Greaves would explain every clause. When I hung up, I wrote the time in my evidence log and underlined it twice. Fear did not vanish. It organized itself. It took a seat and waited for instructions. Emily returned at dusk, carrying a bag with sandwiches we were too distracted to finish. We rehearsed. She asked me to practice asking for water, to practice pausing before answers, to practice repeating a clause back in my words. We built a script that did not sound like a script, questions that opened doors, pauses that invited arrogance. She showed me how to start and stop the recorder with a touch through fabric, a press to the seam, my ribs. Before bed, I wrote a letter to myself, a record of intention, a note that stated why I agreed to a second meeting. I signed and dated it. I sealed it beside the envelope holding the flash drive. I sat on the dining hutch beneath Frank's photograph. His smile in that picture is a thing, the smile of a man who built cabinets with his hands and forgave splinters with patience. I touched the frame. Glass was cool. House exhaled. Tuesday came wrapped in ordinary weather, a gray sky, sidewalks damp from a passing sprinkle. I dressed simply. I tucked the recorder where we had planned. I slipped the earpiece into my pocket. Emily drove. She parked blocks from Greaves' building so we could walk and settle breaths. At the doors, she stopped me and straightened my collar like I was heading into a recital. "You know who you are," she said. I nodded. Hands were steady, my mind precise. Inside elevator, I watched floor numbers climb. The hum of cables sounded like a held breath. I placed my palm over the recorder and felt the faint square beneath the knit. We stepped into corridor. Fluorescent light flattened everything into paper. I pressed earpiece once to confirm the channel. Emily squeezed my hand, then drifted toward waiting area. I took 3 even breaths and turned the handle to Greaves' suite. For the first time, I was no longer the prey. The receptionist offered water. I declined and followed Claire into the conference room. Fluorescent light flattened the table. A stack of documents waited. Jason stood when I entered and smiled confidently. "Let's finish this today. No need to overthink," he said. I took the seat closest to the door. Claire sat across from me and kept her gaze on a legal pad. She traced circles. Greaves arranged his papers with precision, then looked up with a warmth that never reached his eyes. "Thank you for coming back, Mrs. Langley," he said. "This is straightforward. Consolidation, simplification, continuity." I folded my hands and kept my voice even. "Please explain each section in plain English." He nodded, eager to teach. Page 1 sets purpose. Page 2 clarifies appointment. Beginning page 5, you will see a clause that aligns authority with execution. This makes you the legal transferor of all current and future holdings. He paused as if waiting for a blink. I made notes. My pen clicked like a metronome. "Repeat," that I said. He smiled. "This makes you the legal transferor of all current and future holdings." Jason slid the signature page forward. His cufflink caught the light. "We blocked time with the notary already," he said. "No surprises, just signatures." I placed my fingertips on the edge of the paper. I did not pull it closer. What happens if I cannot manage my accounts next year? I asked. Continuity Greaves replied, Your attorney, in fact, will safeguard smooth operations so your legacy is protected. And if I disagree with their decisions, I said, they are empowered to act in your best interest under the instrument's scope, he answered. It is the safest structure at your stage. My pen clicked again. Jason exhaled. Impatience sounded like a small engine. Mom, this is exactly what we discussed, he said. Stop making this complicated for yourself. Claire still would not meet my eyes. Her pen kept making those circles. The ink had not moved. I tried to catch her gaze. Her chin shifted. The distance held. I would like water, I said. The receptionist brought a glass. I lifted it. 2 soft taps against the rim. Greaves resumed. Please initial here, here, and here, he said, tapping the spots. These acknowledge awareness. I traced margins and read aloud so the recorder would catch cadence. Acknowledges authorization to transfer property. Acknowledges authority to change beneficiaries. Acknowledges discretion to execute sales without further consent. Greaves nodded. Exactly. You are thorough. That is why she built anything worth consolidating, Jason muttered. I set the paper down. I would like a clean copy with the final date before I sign, I said. I will return after lunch. Jason straightened. We do not need lunch for this. Still, I said, I will return. Greaves looked to Claire. She lifted her eyes, then lowered them. We can prepare a fresh print, he said. The notary will remain available. I rose. Chair legs whispered across carpet. Thank you for explaining, I said. I appreciate the clarity. Jason forced a chuckle. You will thank us more when taxes shrink, he said. Claire stood but stayed behind the chair. The pen turned in her fingers like a worry bead. I will walk Mom out, she offered. No need, I said gently. I know the way. I stepped into the corridor. The door swung closed. I walked to the elevator and pressed the button. When the doors opened, I touched the hidden switch. The recorder stayed on. Inside the elevator, I watched my reflection settle. On the ground floor, I crossed the lobby into light by the windows where Emily waited. She looked up. I gave a nod. We walked outside into ordinary air. Later at the kitchen table, Emily connected the recorder to my laptop. The file opened like a curtain. Jason's first line landed with the same slick pressure. Let's finish this today, no need to overthink. Greaves's voice followed. This makes you the legal transferor of all current and future holdings. He repeated it twice. Then came the part we hoped for. After my footsteps faded and the door closed, chairs scraped. Paper shuffled. Greaves spoke first. She's clueless. That house in Medford gone next week. Jason laughed, low, satisfied. Estate realignment, he said. We will list while she is at her doctor's. Claire will keep her calm. Silence. Then the tap of a pen. Greaves again. File the notice to the lender. I will prep the affidavit in case anyone asks. Keep the date flexible. Numbers look cleaner that way. Emily paused the audio. The room shrank. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I wrote the timestamp on the log and drew a box around the words they had gifted us. Evidence bright as noon. Emily didn't speak as she rewound the file. The cursor slid back to the moment after Greaves mentioned the Medford house. Jason's voice came next, unhurried like a man discussing the weather. If she gets in the way, we'll move her to assisted care. They'll believe the dementia story. The words were ordinary in tone, but they landed like a blade pressed against my throat. I didn't cry. My eyes didn't even blink for a few seconds. My hands rested flat on the table until my nails bit into my palms. Emily froze, her lips parting, but no sound coming out. She looked at me as if checking whether I had understood the meaning. I had. Greaves's voice followed lower, conspiratorial. The moment she hesitates, we play the doctor angle. No court is going to question medical advice. Jason chuckled. Exactly. You don't destroy family. You make them believe they destroyed themselves. Emily's hand trembled on the mouse. Grandma, she started. I raised my hand slightly, silencing her. Play it again. She did. Every syllable, every pause, every shared smirk between those voices grew sharper in my mind. By the third time, the recording wasn't hurting anymore. It was shaping into something solid. I reached for my notebook, the one with the maroon leather cover my late husband had given me for our last Christmas together. I wrote the sentence exactly as Jason had said it, then underlined it twice. "They'll believe the dementia story." Emily watched me, her brow furrowed. "You're not upset." "Oh, I'm upset," I said, keeping my tone even. "But this isn't the moment for tears. Tears blur the ink, and I need the ink clear." I leaned back, letting the chair creak under my weight. My mind drifted not into sadness, but into calculation. I thought about the years Claire had spent avoiding my calls, about the way Jason had inserted himself into every family decision once they married, about the dinners where I was asked about my will before I'd even finished my salad. The plan was never just about property. This was about erasing me. And erasing someone begins in the mind, not on paper. Emily's voice broke into my thoughts. "What are you going to do?" I met her eyes. The same thing they're doing to me, only in reverse. She tilted her head. Reverse. "They want the world to believe I'm losing my mind," I said. "So we'll let them think they're succeeding. We'll give them rope, Emily, enough to weave their own noose." Her lips curled into a cautious smile. "Grandma, that's actually brilliant." I shook my head. "It's survival. I've been underestimated before. That's how I know the power in letting people think they've already won." For a brief moment, I saw the doubt in her eyes, not doubt in me, but in whether this kind of patience was even possible. She was young, wired for quick reactions. I was old enough to know that revenge served too soon is never complete. I clicked my pen open and drew 2 columns on the page. On the left, I wrote their goals: control assets, remove me physically, destroy credibility. On the right, I wrote ours: document intent, capture evidence, expose publicly. Emily leaned closer. "What about Claire?" My jaw tightened. Claire was my daughter before she was Jason's wife. Somewhere inside her, there had to be a piece of the girl I raised. But that girl was buried under debt dependency and his smooth promises. I couldn't dig her out with sentiment. "We don't go after her," I said. "We go after the truth. If it takes her down, too, that's her choice for standing where she stands." Emily nodded slowly. "So what's next?" I pointed to the recorder. "We catalog every file you copied, every snippet that shows intent. We back it up 3 ways hidden in places they can't find, and we start behaving exactly how they expect until they get careless." The recording still played softly in the background, looping the same 20 seconds. Each time I heard Jason's voice saying, "They'll believe the dementia story," it lost some of its sting and became something else proof. Not just of malice, but of their certainty that no one would believe me. That certainty was their weakness. I closed the notebook and set it beside the recorder. "Emily," I said, "there's one thing you have to remember about predators. They don't stop because they think they've been caught. They stop when they've been trapped so tightly they can't move without choking themselves." She looked at me the way I imagined she might look at a soldier explaining how to survive behind enemy lines. "Grandma," she said quietly, "you scare me sometimes." "Good," I replied, rising from the table. "It means I'm doing this right." I walked to the window and looked out at the street. Cars passed. People walked their dogs. Somewhere out there, Jason and Greaves were thinking I'd left the office that day confused and defeated. Let them keep thinking that, because the moment they believed they'd destroyed me was the moment I started building the wall that would close around them. I have always believed that silence can be a shield, but ink, that's the sword. For 3 nights, I sat at my dining table with the maroon notebook, the recorder, and every document Emily had saved. The house was quiet except for the hum of the old refrigerator. My coffee grew cold beside me as I drafted and redrafted the words that would change everything. The letter wasn't meant to convince them of my strength. It was meant to confirm their mistake. On the first page, in a tone as formal as any legal notice, I wrote, "To Mr. Greaves, Mr. Jason Holt, and Ms. Claire Holt, This is to inform you that all documents previously presented for my signature have been rendered null and void. All prior authorizations, whether written, scanned, or implied, are hereby revoked. Effective immediately, all remaining assets have been transferred into an independent trust with sole beneficiary rights granted to Ms. Emily Harris. The next paragraph carried the real weight. This trust is now administered under the oversight of the Oregon State Attorney's Office, with whom I have filed an official complaint outlining evidence of attempted coercion, fraudulent intent, and conspiracy to commit financial exploitation. I let that sentence breathe on the page. Legal language has a particular kind of music, and that line sang like a funeral hymn. The closing paragraph was simple, even polite. Any future contact on this matter will be conducted through my legal counsel. Further attempts to influence, intimidate, or otherwise pressure me will be recorded and submitted as supplemental evidence to the ongoing investigation. At the bottom, I signed my name in blue ink the way I had signed every honest agreement in my life. Emily read it over my shoulder, her eyes widening at the letterhead. "Grandma, how did you get this?" I smiled faintly. "Remember when I worked part-time at the county clerk's office? You learn a few things about what makes people take a piece of paper seriously. The stationery, the embossed seal, even the font, it wasn't a forgery. It was a reappropriation. I'd requested the exact same style from a legal print shop that served the Oregon State Attorney's Office. Perfectly legal, perfectly intimidating. I slid the letter into 3 separate envelopes, each stamped and addressed by hand. Along with it, I included a carefully organized file copies of the doctored contracts, stills from Emily's screen captures, and a transcript of the most damning portions of the recording. Not all of it, just enough to make them realize there was more. "Why not send all of it now?" Emily asked. "Because I said pressing each envelope flat fear works best when it leaves room for imagination." The next morning, I drove to the main post office in Salem. The clerk weighed the envelopes and affixed the certified mail stickers. I watched them disappear into the back room, knowing that once those green receipts were stamped, the clock started ticking. Not for me, but for them. I didn't call to follow up. I didn't email. I simply went home, made tea, and opened the curtains wide. At 3 in the afternoon, my phone rang. Claire's number. I let it go to voicemail. A text came seconds later. "Mom, we need to talk. Call me, please." Jason's text followed. "This is a misunderstanding. Let's not escalate." And finally, an email from Greaves. "We received your correspondence. You will hear from our office shortly." I leaned back in my chair, letting the messages sit unanswered. It wasn't about stonewalling them. It was about shifting the balance. For months, they had acted with the ease of people holding all the cards. Now they weren't sure how many I had hidden in my sleeve. That night, I placed the recorder and the maroon notebook into a locked fireproof box. I added the original USB drive Emily had given me and a copy of the trust documentation. As I turned the key, I felt the smallest release of tension between my shoulder blades. Not victory, not yet, but the first secure step toward it. Emily sat across from me, her hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea. "So, what happens now?" "Now I said we let the letter do the work." She tilted her head. "And if they fight back, they will," I said. "That's the point. People who think they're cornered will reveal exactly where they've been hiding their weapons." Her smile was slow but certain. "Grandma, I think I'm starting to understand how you survived all these years." I thought of my late husband's words, "Trust is love without paperwork." I had learned that paperwork might not create love, but it could protect everything love was meant to safeguard. The letter was more than a notice. It was a boundary written in the language they understood best, law consequence, and the cold precision of an official seal. And as the night deepened outside my window, I felt the quiet satisfaction of knowing that for the first time, they weren't sleeping easily. Because they now knew the game had changed, and I was no longer playing by their rules. 3 days after the letters were sent, the backlash began. It started with Claire's voice trembling on the other end of the line. "Mom," she said, "I just need you to trust me one more time." Her words felt almost familiar, like an old lullaby gone sour. In the background, I could hear muffled noises, maybe a chair scraping, maybe Jason whispering something he didn't want me to hear. "Trust you?" I asked quietly. "After all this, you don't understand," she said, her breath catching. "This was supposed to fix everything. Jason had a plan. We could have paid off the house, gotten ahead. You've always said you wanted to leave something for Emily. This was the way." Her logic twisted like barbed wire. I could almost see her sitting there trying to braid desperation into a gift-wrapped excuse. "You think leaving something for Emily starts with taking it from me," I said. Silence. Then the faintest sniffle. "If you don't help us," Jason says. Her voice trailed off and she hung up. The next morning, the first letter from Jason's attorney arrived. Thick paper, polished letterhead, words dressed in expensive ink but thin on substance. "Our client, Mr. Jason Holt, demands that you cease all defamatory actions, retract any accusations, and reinstate the transfer documents previously agreed upon." The letter read like a performance meant to scare, not to stand up in court. Jason didn't sign it himself. He didn't dare. I placed the envelope in a drawer and made no reply. On the fourth day, an email from one of my old acquaintances in the legal world reached me. "Did you know the state bar is looking into Greaves?" I didn't. But I wasn't surprised. The man had disappeared from our story as if someone had pulled him out by the collar. His office phone rang without answer. His email bounced back with an automated reply, "On leave until further notice." That phrase, "further notice," always means more than it says. Emily came over that afternoon with a bag of groceries. We sat at the kitchen table while she unpacked lettuce apples and a jar of honey. "You haven't answered any of them, have you?" she asked. "No. You don't want to just tell them off." I shook my head. You don't win a game by playing every round they offer. Sometimes the smartest move is to take the board away entirely. The truth was, I didn't need to prove them wrong to feel right. I didn't need to humiliate Jason corner Claire or see Greaves in handcuffs. Justice wasn't always about headlines. Sometimes it was simply about preservation, about guarding the part of yourself they were trying to take. But I would be lying if I said their sudden weakness didn't register with me. The edge in Jason's voice, once smug, was gone. Claire's sobs were a far cry from the calm manipulations she'd practiced for months. And Greaves, the man who thought he could orchestrate it all from behind mahogany walls, was now dodging his own reflection. In my garden that evening, I watered the rosemary and the late summer tomatoes. The air was cooling the light gold against the soil. Emily sat on the porch scrolling through her phone. She looked up and smiled faintly. "It feels like they're the ones hiding now." "They are," I said. "And the thing about hiding is it leaves you with too much time to think, time to wonder how much the other person knows, time to imagine the next step." I didn't tell her that this was exactly where I wanted them adrift in uncertainty, unable to predict whether my next move would be a phone call, a lawsuit, or nothing at all. The phone rang again just before dark. Claire's number flashing insistently. I let it ring out. A voicemail appeared. I didn't listen. Some words once heard can't be unheard, and I had no more space in me for excuses. That night, as I wrote in the maroon notebook, I realized the strangest thing: I didn't feel victorious. I felt still, like a lake after a storm surface, unbroken but holding the memory of the wind. Justice, I thought, isn't always about winning. Sometimes it's about refusing to lose what matters. And for the first time in months, I slept without keeping one ear open. 2 weeks after the storm began to quiet, Emily came over on a Sunday morning. The light poured through my kitchen window, hitting the steam rising from our coffee mugs. She was holding the thick blue folder that held every paper connected to the trust I'd set up in her name. "I've been thinking," she said, sliding the folder toward me. "I don't want it." At first, I thought I'd misheard her. "You don't want it?" "Not to own," she clarified. "I'll manage it. I'll keep every cent safe, make sure it grows. But it's not mine, Grandma. You worked for this. It's your life's work, your safety. I can't take it like this, like a prize you had to wrestle away from your own daughter. I sat back in my chair. Part of me felt an odd pang because I'd thought giving her the trust was my way of passing on more than money. I thought it was giving her security, a shield against the kind of people who just tried to strip mine my life. But Emily's face wasn't rejecting me. It was resolute. If I take it as my own, she said, then this story ends with me. But if I keep it in your name, I can make sure it's part of something bigger. What do you mean? I asked. She reached into her bag and pulled out a single-page letter. The header bore the name of a nonprofit I'd heard of only in passing, the Oregon Senior Legal Defense Network. She placed it in front of me. I applied for an internship, she said, and they accepted me. It's unpaid. I'll be working on cases where elderly people have been tricked into signing away homes, accounts, rights, just like they tried to do to you. The pride in my chest rose so fast it almost hurt. You're still in school. How are you going to manage? She smiled. I'll figure it out. I've got a scholarship, my savings, and the part-time job at the coffee shop. It's not about comfort, Grandma. It's about doing something that matters. I looked at her the way her hands rested calmly on the table, the quiet fire in her eyes, and I saw not just the young woman who had saved me from signing my life away, but the one who had chosen to turn that victory into a mission. She went on, her voice steady, but weighted with conviction. What happened to you, Grandma, happens to someone every single day. Most of them don't have someone to step in. I want to be that person. I want to be the reason someone gets to keep their home, their dignity, their independence. Her words hung in the air. They weren't dramatic, but they were final. I reached across the table and took her hand. Then you'll do it, I said, and I'll help you however I can. That trust, it's yours to manage. Make it a tool for whatever good you see fit. Just promise me something. What's that? Promise me you won't let the fight change you into the thing you're fighting against. People like Jason Clare even grieves they didn't start out that way. Something in them hardened, maybe from fear, maybe from greed. Don't let that happen to you. She nodded, and I believed her. That afternoon, we walked together in my garden. The rosemary had doubled in size since the last time she'd seen it, the tomatoes blushing deep red in the sun. Emily bent to pick a small cluster and held them in her palm. Funny, she said, how something can look so fragile, but still hold its own against everything, the wind, the rain, the heat. It's not funny, I said. It's survival. And now it's your turn to grow something. She glanced at me, smiling faintly. I guess it is. When she left that day, I watched her walk down the path toward her car, the blue folder still tucked under her arm, not as a possession, but as a responsibility. And I realized that for the first time in months, the future didn't feel like a door closing. It felt like a door opening, one I didn't have to walk through myself because someone I trusted completely was already on the other side holding it wide. It was just past 5 p.m. when I heard the knock. Not the confident, rapid rapping I'd come to associate with Jason, but a slow, uneven thud. I opened the door, and for a moment, I almost didn't recognize him. He looked smaller. His once tailored suit was replaced by a wrinkled button-down sleeves rolled up as if he'd dressed in a hurry. His face was gaunt, the healthy color gone from his cheeks, and his eyes, those sharp, calculating eyes, no longer met mine with arrogance. Patricia, he said, his voice rough. I was wrong. The words hung in the air between us like smoke. But before I could respond, he added, "But you weren't entirely right either." I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. That's an interesting way to apologize. He gave a humorless laugh. I'm not here for absolution. I need you to know it wasn't all about money. Not at first. I stayed silent, letting the weight of his words settle. Jason shifted his stance, glancing toward the road as though afraid someone might see him here. When I married Claire, he began, I thought your family had everything I'd ever wanted. Stability, respect, roots. My childhood was nothing like that. I swore I'd never be powerless again. And when Claire started talking about securing the family assets, I convinced myself I was protecting us, protecting her. And somewhere along the way, I said quietly, you convinced yourself that meant taking what wasn't yours. He winced, but didn't deny it. I wanted power, he admitted. And you're right, I didn't need to steal it. But I did. And now? His voice trailed off, and for the first time, I saw something I'd never seen in him before. Shame. I could have slammed the door. I could have told him every bitter truth he'd earned. But instead, I asked, why are you here, Jason? Really? His jaw tightened. The investigation's bad. Greaves turned on me. Claire won't speak to me unless it's to scream. And I keep thinking about Emily, how she looked at me like I was nothing but a threat. I didn't come to beg for anything, He faltered. I needed to stand here and tell you to your face I lost. And it's not just the law or the money. It's that I lost whatever chance I had to be part of something decent. For a moment, I saw the man Claire must have fallen for once. A man who could dream about being better, even if he'd failed spectacularly at it. I'm not the judge here, I said, my voice steady. I'm not here to give you peace of mind. That's your work to do. But if you're expecting me to forget what you did, don't. Actions leave marks. They left them on me, on Emily, on your own wife. He nodded, eyes dropping to the ground. I know. I just wanted you to hear me say it. As he turned to leave, I called after him. Jason. He stopped, half-turned. You could have built something with what you had. You didn't need to burn it down to feel powerful. He gave the faintest nod before walking away, his figure shrinking against the fading light. When I closed the door, I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel sorry for him either. What I felt was something more complicated, an awareness that not every villain stays a villain forever, and not every apology deserves a welcome. But maybe some people can change. And whether or not Jason wasn't mine to decide anymore. The pen felt heavier than I remembered. Maybe it wasn't the pen at all, but the weight of what I was about to write. I sat at the old oak desk in my study, the same one Frank and I had bought together when we were newly married. The drawers still smelled faintly of cedar, the surface worn smooth from decades of letters, lesson plans, and bills. Today it would hold something far more final, my new will. The first change was the hardest. My hand trembled as I drew a line through Claire's name, then Jason's. I didn't pause, didn't let sentiment talk me out of it. They had both made their choices. This was mine. Emily's name remained, but not as an heir to wealth. Instead, she would oversee the trust, ensuring it served its purpose to fund scholarships, legal aid, and safe housing for elderly victims of financial exploitation. The trust wasn't for her. It was for people like me, people who might not have an Emily to stand between them and betrayal. A significant portion would go to the Elder Protection Alliance, a nonprofit I'd learned about from Karen. They had a hotline, legal volunteers and advocates who visited nursing homes and community centers to teach seniors how to guard their rights. I had seen too many headlines about people losing everything in silence. Not on my watch, not anymore. I signed each page with a steady hand, sealing the envelope with the crisp finality of someone who knew she wouldn't need to revise it again. As I leaned back, my eyes wandered to the framed photographs on the bookshelf. There was one of me, at 23, standing in front of a chalkboard with my first group of students. I could still remember the day I taught them about justice, not the legal kind written in books, but the kind that lived in your spine. I'd asked them, what does it mean to do the right thing when no one is watching? Most of them had shrugged, but one boy. Peter had stared at me with those bright, sharp eyes as if the question had unlocked something in him. I could still see that expression, the instant understanding that doing the right thing wasn't about applause or reward. It was about making sure someone else's tomorrow was better than their yesterday. That memory stayed with me as I sealed the will in a fireproof folder and placed it in the safe. Frank used to tell me, "We can't take any of it with us, Pat. The best we can do is make sure what we leave behind matters." Back then, I thought he meant money. Now I understood he meant legacy. This wasn't about punishment anymore. Claire and Jason would face their own consequences with or without my involvement. My role now was to close the door behind me and make sure the locks were strong enough for the next person who might have to stand where I had stood. I walked out into the garden, the late afternoon sun painting the roses in gold. For the first time in months, I felt no weight pressing on my chest. What remained wasn't bitterness or loss or even victory. It was clarity. It was knowing that while I couldn't erase what had been done to me, I could make sure it didn't happen to someone else. And that was worth far more than any house account or title I'd ever owned. The porch boards kept the day's warmth under my heels. Evenings settled over Ashland in a lavender that made the street softer. Emily brought 2 mugs and a small plate of lemon cookies. She set them on the rail and slid into the rocker beside me. We didn't speak at first. Silence felt earned. It felt like the right language after so many days written in law. Steam rose. A nuthatch tapped the oak. I watched the breath leave my cup and thought about paper, how it can be a wall or a bridge depending on who holds the pen. Emily tucked one knee beneath her. "I met my supervisor this afternoon," she said. "She was kind, blunt, perfect. Orientation is Monday. Intake after lunch." "Do you feel ready?" I asked. She considered. "I feel willing." I smiled. Willing builds the muscles ready will need. She laughed, then let her gaze fall to the yard where the rosemary leaned. They sent me 3 case summaries to read. "I kept seeing you between the lines, not because you needed rescuing, but because you refused to sign the script written for you. Refusal is a signature," I said. "It just doesn't leave ink." We sipped our tea. The porch light clicked on by timer. Moths tapped the glass and fell away. I thought of Claire, but found no anger left to spend. My love for her had not died. It had changed shape. It now required distance. Emily broke the quiet. "I want to keep the trust lean," she said. "No ceremony. Money where urgency is. Emergency counsel, rent protection when predators circle. Classes in plain English so people can hear trouble before it knocks." "Good," I said. "Let it be a ladder, not a stage." She nodded and bit a cookie. "I've been writing a checklist. Questions to ask, phrases to use, signs that a clause is hiding teeth. Then teach people to hold their own sentences," I said. "If your mouth knows the words, your spine will follow." A breeze lifted the edge of the quilt across our knees. I traced a crooked seam Frank had sewn, on purpose his protest against the furniture store lie of perfection. Grief felt close, but not sharp. "Do you think Claire will call again?" Emily asked. "She already has," I said. "I haven't listened yet." I rested my palm on the quilt. Love can wait for integrity to catch up. Emily's fingers found mine. "If you want me there when you call her back, I will." "I know," I said. "That may be the bravest part, standing by the door whether it opens or not." We watched a neighbor water his lawn with a slow sweep. The world sounded ordinary again. Sprinklers, a dog declaring opinions, a bicycle chain clicking past. I took a breath that reached the bottom of my lungs. When I taught 8th graders, they thought justice was a gavel, I said. I told them it is a habit. The smallest honest choice repeated until it becomes a street you can walk at night. "That is what you did," Emily said. "You told the truth even when people preferred a prettier sentence." Maybe I said. Or maybe I stopped apologizing for the light I had been carrying. She tilted her head. "I have been afraid of becoming hard." "Stay particular," instead, I said. "Notice the color of the sky, the shape of a lie, the name of the neighbor's dog. Hardness blurs, attention saves." She breathed in. "What if I fail?" she asked. "You will," I said. Then adjust the plan, apologize quickly, continue. Justice is not a performance. It is maintenance. We finished our tea. 2 teens coasted by on skateboards. They waved without slowing. I thought of the safe inside, the blue folder, the will with its decisions, the letters that had traveled to men who believed paperwork could erase a woman. The papers were still important, but they had become evidence of something larger than property, evidence that 2 people on a porch could choose a different inheritance. Emily stood to gather the cups. I reached to stop her and kept her hand a moment longer. The night had settled without bargaining. For once, I did not feel watched by worry. If tomorrow demanded courage, we would pay in exact change. Emily squeezed my fingers. You know she said we didn't burn anything down. We just refused to surrender the map. I looked at her and saw both the child who once counted lightning and the woman who now counts affidavits. Relief came. My voice felt sure the way a step feels when it finds the riser in the dark now. The truth isn't always a weapon. Sometimes it's just a light. And we finally turned it on.